it's the thing that got me into the arts. It's the thing that got me turned on. And I can specifically say, my aunts, they were 12 years old in 1964. So they bought all the Beatle albums. They're from Pennsylvania. They were young girls and they thought the Beatles were cute. And so they bought all the original Beatle albums. And when it was 1970 and I was about 6 years old, they discovered Bob Seger and Getting High. So they no longer wanted to see the Beatles anymore. And they chucked that out and they gave me their entire collection of Beatle albums, original presses, the big thick cardboard. They'd even used magic markers and circled Paul. They put horns on Ringo. It's such a time capsule. But for me as a kid, all of a sudden I get these albums dumped on me. My parents had a big old stereo, but not many records. We weren't poor, but they weren't wasting money, quote unquote, on music. They had, other things to pay for. So I put these Beatle albums on and it was like my brain got unlocked, really opened up in my brain. It was the dopamine that I was jonesing after ever since. I ended up, taking piano lessons, bass lessons. I played trombone in all of the marching bands and stuff like that. I got into choir and all those things. And it's an everyday event. A day without music doesn't work for me. This morning, I just rediscovered McCartney's Ram from 1972. And, it's a top to bottom handmade album. Handmade before handmade was cool. And at the time, it really wasn't that well received. Wasn't very polished. But man, you listen to that now. That's a one-man band just churning out what's in him. And this isn't a complete thing on the Beatles, although I did name my daughter Abby, Abbey, after Abbey Road. I can talk about that later. But every day you have to set the tone with what you're feeling. And the great news is that the kaleidoscope of music has it all. And that includes classical, opera, whatever you're doing. But, there's a couple of mainstays, some main feeds that really... I'm 56. I was born December 7th, 1964, and I'm a white boy from the suburbs of Pennsylvania. So there's certain rivers that, were in my ears, big arena rock from the 70s. My go-tos, and since I know the catalogs so well, are Genesis, the Beatles, Rush, Stones, Springsteen, all that, Def Leppard, which, believe it or not, has levels. So, I mean, clearly, I started my day, like, what am I going? I go to bed at night with some sleep ambiance stuff, but it's not ambiance because I'm so OCD. I have to curate it to make sure it's the right chakra music. So, I'm the guy in the car who, if it's your car and it's your phone, I find a way within 30 seconds to see if I might take a look and see what you've got and change what you've got on if it's the wrong music for the drive. Which, by the way, I've got kids. I've got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And guess what? They don't have the same taste in music as their dad. And so already there's the car conflict and the house conflict. The good news is I like Moana and I can listen to Hamilton and Trolls soundtrack a number of times because I have to. There, I'll start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a lot of synergy with some of the things you've said. I'm a fellow Beatles absolute obsessive. I watched have you seen their anthology series? The docu series.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like that is the piece of television or the piece of film that I've seen the most. I was watching that when I was watching cartoons. Just I like to try and watch it every year. It's so uplifting, just kind of seeing their creativity. And I love what you said about Ram. What do you think about Paul McCartney's new album, though? I was kind of disappointed. Like, I love Paul McCartney, but I was... No,
and I love McCartney, too. That was the last show I saw. I'm sorry, it's not the last show I saw. I took my kids to their first big arena concert, Dodger Stadium. It was the end of the tour, and that's when Ringo came out. Ringo came out, and they played together. So I'm sitting there with my girls, and I'm like, there's Ringo. I'm like, guess what? There's only 2 Beatles on planet Earth, and you're seeing them right now. And it was extraordinary. We sat way up in the top of the stadium, and it was because, they were, 7 and 9. I didn't know how long they would last. I didn't know what the reaction was going to be. It was the perfect spot because they could see everything. They could see the crowd, but they weren't completely in it and freaked out. And plus McCartney, tours with those giant screens. So unless you're like really right down there looking at it, it's the best seat in the house. So my kids loved it. They saw their first iPhone. Everybody put their iPhones up for yesterday and Hey Jude. And oh, I'm sorry. What was your question?
Look, McCartney was the last gig that you saw, but
yeah. So okay. So McCartney 3.
Yeah.
It's not his strongest effort, and I wanted it to be one of those sort of like capstone. I heard that, and I was listening to the New from what is that 10 years ago now from McCartney?
Nearly, yeah. Yeah,
nearly. And in each album, there's always something where it all comes together again. But the idea that it's going to be a top to bottom sweep like Band on the Run is, that's, I don't think most artists have more than a couple of those in them anyways. But I was hoping for something a little stronger, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I feel like he almost shouldn't have put it out. And I hate to say that because, for a start, I would love him to come on the show. So I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but at the same time, I think honesty is important. The press reviewed McCartney 1, which in my mind is a masterpiece, and they didn't review that well. But now we've entered the age of, like, it seems celebrity kiss ass to a ridiculous extent, and they're telling people that it's a great album. I mean, I still love the idea of him creating a lockdown, though. That is pretty cool, and he's got such a lot of empathy as a writer. I mean, all of their personalities are just so interesting. I don't know what it is about them. Will it ever be repeated? Could it ever be repeated, something like that? Especially where the band write their own songs, play their own instruments. So much music now feels so processed and manufactured when I'm talking about top 40 commercial music.
Yeah, no, I watched the Ron Howard documentary about the touring years with the Beatles.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
It's so wonderful because it's so full of energy, and it's also full of the life and the hard workedness of it. And there's a segment in it where they're playing, I think, Washington D.C. and they point out that they're surrounded by an audience. It's like the last time they're ever like surrounded, and their monitors, they can't hear themselves. They can't hear anything, but they've been so tight for so long. You see them kick into I Saw Her Standing There, and it's just like the four of them go, wow. Now, many bands get that zone. Many bands get those things. But at that time, given what they were doing, they were playing in places and playing in front of crowds that people had not seen for a band like that. And I think the notion of all of a sudden them transitioning effortlessly from having half covers to half originals to all of a sudden just putting out originals. When you look at that output in a span of 8 years, it is jaw-dropping. I'm a big fan of U2 as well, but it took a lot longer to make a lot of different albums as it goes along. It's 8 years of George Martin had a great sort of, I think it's in the anthology, where they talk about the middle years. He talks about the growth and the explosion of young men in their prime, young artists in their prime, where there was no boundaries, and the technology was catching up with their heads. And I think, as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame fills up with people, and as I keep seeing people that I'm going to see live in concert, because it might be the last time you see him. I don't go see Van Morrison because I think he's going to punch the lights out the whole way. But there might be 3 songs where it all comes together, and that's exactly what I found as I watch these bands that I've seen most of my adult life, who are a little bit older. I'm the last child of the '60s. You know what I mean? So I go see Yes. I love Yes. And I'll see the remnants of Yes until Steve Howe is no longer here. But, I got a chance to see them when they were all together, and now I've seen them splintered. And it's not like there's this magic for the entire concert, but there are moments where it gels in a way that is the music of the spheres, which is the reason you go see live music in the first place. I saw Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. Tony Bennett was like 114 years old, and he wisely hung out near the piano, gave a couple of shticks here and there, and Lady Gaga changed costume and swirled around him. But there was 2 songs that 84-year-old man was going to show you that he was still Tony Bennett. And he came right downstage to the apron of the stage of the Hollywood Bowl, and he planted his feet. She was nowhere to be seen. And he sang a love song like a schoolboy, and it brought 18,000 people to their fucking knees at the Hollywood Bowl. And I was like, that's majesty. That's glorious. And on planet Earth, I probably will never see Tony Bennett again, but I got to see him then. And that becomes part of the fabric of my life and my resonance. And, you know, that's why I like to go see that. And, and are we going to have that kind of mastery again, like the Beatles? I think not. The world has just changed in such a colossal way. I don't know if you can ever command that kind of attention, or they've already wiped the, I think it was the New Musical Express after Let It Be came out. They said if Let It Be is to be the last album of this group, it'll be a sad epitaph, a terrible epitaph, a sad and tawdry end to a musical fusion that wiped clean and drew again the face of popular music. And I thought, wow, right. When do you have that kind of shock again? And I don't know if you do. And that might just be an old man speaking, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just quite difficult to know what it will be in terms of anything human, because people are talking about artificial intelligence composing songs and stuff, and you know, that's really just sort of like it's a different thing. That's like being excited about technology. It's not being excited about the arts, because the arts is, you know, it's a humanity. It's all about human contribution and human soul.
The campfire, right? It's cave people discovering fire and sitting around the campfire and telling stories to assuage each other's from the fear of what's out in the dark, really, which is why the theater, movies, concerts, lights go down, the excitement comes up. What will be revealed? What will we share? What's the shamanistic, experience we're going to have?
Yeah.
I remember seeing I saw Peter Gabriel's So tour back in '87. I'd taken a bus to the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and I didn't know what to expect. I knew So a little bit. This was before I even got into Genesis or anything like that. So I didn't even know that history. I was that age in college where Sledgehammer was good, right? And so I go to see Peter Gabriel, and of course, it's heavy on So, but his catalog as a solo artist is, of course, nothing like So at all. And he's got these lights that are dancing on the stage with him, and he's presenting him. So it was crazy. I akin that and like seeing Springsteen and Rush, but Springsteen and Gabriel, I think, had that sort of religious experience in that the crowd was so electric, and Gabriel really worked it in a really deliberate way where he wasn't seeking approval. He had a thing that he was trying to get across. And I saw Robert Plant at the Greek Theater a couple of years back with his, what do they call it? The moving shakers, the supernatural, the super somethings.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And he also, he's Robert Plant. He's at the Greek Theater. What does he have to prove? Nothing. And yet what he was doing was working with the band and trying to find that thing. And the crowd's listening, and crowd's responding, and he's working out some new numbers, and he's extending it. And he's asking people to keep going. Like, he's working the band. And all of a sudden, about, I don't know, a third of the way into the concert, I don't know what happened, but he felt it on stage. You could feel it, and you could feel it roll off the stage and roll up through the audience. And the audience responded by just getting up. And then we all started grooving to this song that I didn't even know, that had sort of morphed into something else, and it went somewhere and it finished. And he came to the mic, he's like, yeah, right? And the place is like, yes. And I was like, right, we were all just celebrating that moment of being alive, interconnectedness. And I don't see how a machine ever is going to do that.
Yeah. Well, it feels completely unnatural. So presumably you must be kind of itching to see a gig again once it's safe to do so, or after the pandemic comes to an end. I mean, hopefully it will be summer or whenever it will be next year.
Well, my thought was, I'll see. I was joking about next year's Christmas parties. Even people we don't like, we're going to show up. We're going to invite. Everyone's going to go to everything all the time. And it's funny, speaking of like old acts. I was going to do my part to participate in the Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Joan Jett behemoth, because if they're willing to go out, I'm willing to show up and give them one more, shot at glory at filling up SoFi Stadium, which is like 60,000 people. I saw Def Leppard in '83 at a shed, basically in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when they were doing their first tour through the country with Pyromania. And I bought the Union Jack sleeveless T-shirt, and all the kids who went to the concert did that the next day. We just looked like dorks and idiots and fun. But I've seen them a number of times over the years And a lot of those bands that have stuck around, survived, losing members or whatever, they haven't gotten worse for the most part. If they're still really out there, like I saw Neil Schon in Journey, and I saw Steve Lukather in Toto. I saw Toto finally years after they got rid of their original lead singer. But Steve Lukather was a hotshot guitarist when he was like 17. He's probably knocking close to 60. He has not gotten worse. I can tell you that. Yeah. He could play anything. And I was like, holy shit. The same thing as watching Phil Collins and Vivian Campbell at Def Leppard. I'm just like, these guys aren't slouches. They're not phoning in how to play guitar. And they're taking moments in these shows to like really nail it. Def Leppard's a professional band. They know what to do. They know what to deliver. And I dig it. It's also part of my youth. So it goes into that. So I was going to go to SoFi Stadium and cheer them on. And I will this summer as well if they come back. But I will be at every venue. Los Angeles is a great place to go see shows.
It's a great music city with an unbelievable heritage. Toto is such a great band. We've had on the podcast. Their new singer Joseph Williams is damn good.
Look, I've seen Journey. I saw Journey with Steve Perry back in the day, and then I saw him with the new guy, and he's great. He's got the pipes and he's got the energy, and it lifts up the band. I saw Journey and Yes, Pearl Jam, Joni Mitchell. I'm sorry, Joan Baez get inducted to the Hall of Fame about 3 years ago in Brooklyn, and Steve Perry came out and with the band to get inducted, and he was so gracious on stage. The rumors were flying like, oh, he's going to sing with him. I'm like, he's not going to sing with him. He hasn't sung in years. He's not going to stand up here. You just can't jump back in, really. And he was so gracious from stage because he was, he pointed out, and I can't remember the new lead singer's names, but Arthur? No. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But from stage, he said, hey, I want to thank you for keeping the flame alive. You're the voice of Journey. I was the voice of Journey. And together, it was like really classy and great. And then the current version of Journey is the one who's going to play at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I thought, oh, that's just a tough gig for the lead singer. Everybody in there has like partied with Steve Perry and have their own opinions about that. But they were tight. They were a tight band. Why? Because they've been touring together for 5-10 years, So same thing with Toto. I see Toto, and I was reminded, oh, I know more Toto songs than I ever suspected. Yeah. Steve Lukather came out and did a Jimi Hendrix, like 15 minutes, just took center stage, planted his feet, put the axe up, and then just took a tour through all the great guitar solos ever. It was jaw-dropping. I thought it was amazing. And I hear he's a really great guy too, personally.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy. He's been on the show twice now. And that I think they have a slight and Steve Lukather has a slight view that Toto are perhaps not as respected as they should be.
I think so too. I've seen that in interviews, and I've gotten that as well. And he's not wrong. Yeah. He's not wrong. Everybody's like, oh, Toto, Rosanna. It's like, no, not just that. That was the behemoth, but they're a good band.
Yeah, I mean they played on a lot of the big records, like as session guys. They're the band on Thriller. They're the band on a lot of the Steely Dan stuff, Boz Scaggs, you name it. They're probably some of the best session players that ever existed. But so I wanted to ask you, first of all, as we were talking about the Beatles, I'm very interested here. So you named your daughter Abby, and after Abbey Road.
My wife and I were going to Europe for the first time together. We'd just gotten together. We get over to London. And I said I wanted to go to Abbey Road. And my wife kept teasing me. She's like, the Beatles aren't there anymore. And I'm like, I know, but I want to go. So we go over to St. John's Wood. Then we go stand in front of Abbey Road. And, just standing there, of course, it's a pilgrimage, really. It really is. And I'm standing there and I'm like, it's so ordinary, yet so not. And I look over and my wife she's got tears in her eyes. And I'm like, what's going on? And she goes, I don't know, all this, the white wall is graffitied, of course. And she goes, I'm just looking at it. And all of a sudden it just dawned on me that all this beautiful love energy came out of here. And it's just, but in the back of my mind, I thought, if we get pregnant and we have a girl, I wonder what she would think of the name of Abby, spelled like Abbey Road. And I just tucked that in my own brain. Well, it turned out she got pregnant on that trip. We figured it out later. And so we come back home to Los Angeles. We find out that she's pregnant. And I drive into my driveway one afternoon, and she had just gotten off the phone with her friend. and she was recounting the story to her friend, and her friend, who's psychic, said, she goes, oh, well, you're going to have a girl. And that was her naming herself. She wants to be named Abby. She hangs up the phone. I come in the back door in the kitchen, and she turns to me and she goes, if it's a girl, what do you think about the name Abby, spelled Abbey? And I had never, ever told her. And I said, sounds good to me. That was it. We found out it was a girl, and that was her name.
What happenstance that is. That's
yeah.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
really kind of crazy. And then our other daughter, Delilah, is actually the plain white tees. Hey there, Delilah. Not as glamorous, but nonetheless.
Wow. So does Abby like Abbey Road then?
She does, and they do love the Beatles. There was a picture book of Yellow Submarine that my best friend in high school had been given to him when he was young, and he gave it to me. I don't know why I had it, but I had it. Big, tall book, and I used it as a children's book. We would read that before going to bed at night. So they knew all their names and stuff like that. And then we started watching Yellow Submarine. When Yellow Submarine was reissued in the theaters, all cleaned up, we went and saw that together. They haven't seen A Hard Day's Night or Help yet, but they listen to the music all the time. My wife plays guitar and I play piano. And so there's music in the house. And the Beatles are it's such a great catalog for kids to listen to anyways, because one, in the same way that it hit me, those harmonies are undeniable. The hooks are undeniable. The message is undeniable and good. And it varies enough that it keeps their interest. So they have their favorite Beatles. They like Ringo a lot, obviously, because they sing Yellow Submarine all the time and Octopus's Garden. But we've been listening to a lot of Revolver and Rubber Soul recently. And they're liking those songs because as they are getting older, they're also taking piano lessons, and I'm starting to show them some rudimentary chords to be like, here, you can play this song, or we can play it together. So it's a great thing to latch on to because it's in my bones, and now it's starting to get in their bones. And I think culturally, it's something that you can still hang your hat on no matter what. It's not going away anytime soon. And so therefore, it will serve them well as they grow musically, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of your own musical ability, how do you play? Do you read, or do you look at chords? What's been?
I used to read. When I played trombone, I read bass clef. When I played piano, I took like 2 years of lessons when I was in high school, but I didn't have the attention span for it, so I stopped. So I can read a little bit of music. I can't transfer it immediately and sight read onto the piano. My kids have been taking lessons, so I've taken advantage of starting to play again. But my goals no longer are like to be able to sit down and read sheet music. My goals are more to, be like a saloon player, have like maybe 30 to 40 songs, in your head, in your hands, you can sit down and play of varying degrees. And of course, the wonderful growth about that is like, I started doing that. And then you start hearing stuff and you go like, oh, wait, that's right here. And then this is here. So then you start finding more songs and more songs and more songs and more songs. So
it's more fun that way.
Well, for me, because I don't have the discipline at this point of my life that has many responsibilities, right? I'm raising a family and work and da-da-da-da. So the idea of making practice and a goal of practice something that I'll only disappoint myself and or a teacher in, I don't want that mental thing. So I'll sit down and sort of like run through everything I know and do some scales and stuff like that. And YouTube has been great though. Like I was thinking of an REM song the other day. It's on the end of, it's not Night Swimming. I don't know. But anyways, you go to YouTube and you can find people who, for varying degrees, will show you varying, different keys, different ways to play it. And so I found a couple of places where I can go and I can at least get the start of it. And then I know enough and know the music enough that I can go ahead and launch from there. I'm like, oh, it starts on F. Okay, well, then I can jack it out from there. So that's what I'm trying to do, I was trying to figure out Genesis's Behind the Lines from Duke because I came across those chords and I was like, well, I'm not Peter Banks. I mean, for God's sakes, Tony Banks. I mean, like he's extraordinary. He is extraordinary. But you know what? If you can play a C and an F and a G, and you know how to go down the scale a little bit, you can actually play the opening of it if you work slowly at it. So I've been working on that for a little while, and nobody wants to sing along to Behind the Lines, by the way, but it's okay. That makes me happy.
And it's you actually chose Abacab by Genesis as one of your 3 records. So what made you choose that one? And so are you a Phil, you prefer Phil singing to Peter?
Oh, the eternal thing. I mean, look, Summer's Ready, colossal song that sits atop a pile of music that you can't even begin to sift through. But Phil Collins, it's a great voice. I mean, they're a unique band in that transition. It worked with me. You can't stay in The Lamb Lies Down for an entire career.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.
I thought the band was called Abacab. Like literally, I had no knowledge of Genesis. This is probably I'm a sophomore in high school, probably around 1980. I guess Abacab came out in 79 or 81 or 82. And I started listening to it, and it caught my ear. I was like, what's that? What's that? Who's this? The clarity. What I really like to note in that album, Me and Sarah Jane and Keep It Dark. There's moments in both those songs where they're driving in sort of straightforward in a pop song, and I use the quotes loosely. But then there's a middle 8 or 16 in it where all of a sudden it becomes gauzy. It becomes that stretchy thing where it goes off of itself. And doesn't necessarily fit the song, but it does. There's a churning in Keep It Dark that goes on. And yet Phil's sort of doing this ethereal thing that's going out, which is very much a touchstone from the prog area. But also just the way I've learned in subsequent interviews, just the way they think. Like they don't necessarily need the words to match up to much of anything. They like the idea of the sounds and what it means. And they're not necessarily trying to sew anything together in a nice package. Although they do have songs like that. Many of their songs do not. They're not deliberately cryptic, but certainly open to interpretation. And I like that. And so those 2 songs really launched me. And then I started listening as they released going forward and started going backwards as well at the same time. So, by the time Invisible Touch came out, I was all the way back to Horizon and Trespass and all that with Genesis. So I ate it all up without a doubt. But Abacab is because at a time when I thought I knew it all, here was new sounds that came out of nowhere for me. And I was like, oh, and it lined up very much with the Rush. That was, the real, the Beatles were given to me by my aunts when I was 6. But when I was a freshman in high school, I was in the parking lot of Cedar Cliff High School. And my friend, Mark Perna, who was a junior, he was a fellow trombonist. He had a yellow Datsun B210 that had speakers in the doors, and his doors were kicked open, and he had an 8-track, kids, playing The Spirit of Radio. And I was like, that song finished. And it was one of those things where Brian was smoking cigarettes. So he was smoking, listening to this, and then I kept trying to talk during it, and he kept putting his hand up saying, wait, wait, wait. And then when the song ends, I'm like, what is that? He said, that is your new favorite band. And he wasn't wrong. I got hooked right then and there on The Spirit of Radio and Permanent Waves, and I started listening to Rush nonstop. And I picked Signals as another touchstone album because I was listening to Permanent Waves, and then, of course, Moving Pictures comes out, but I didn't get to see them on tour. I was too young. But in 1982, Signals came out, and my parents allowed me to take a bus from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Philadelphia again. This was sponsored by a radio station, WTPA, FM 104 Rocks, Central PA. And they would rent a bus, and you would buy tickets, and they would provide you with concert tickets and the bus ride home. So I'm like 16. I don't know. My friend Frank Appa is 16, and my parents, just God bless them, think it's okay to put me on a bus with a bunch of people going to a concert. Well, we get on the bus and everybody starts getting high and drunk, right? We don't know anything. So we eat some brownies that some guy offered us because we're like, well, we can't drink and we can't smoke. Of course, it's pop brownies and all that stuff. And But we get to the concert, and I see Rush during the Signals tour for the first time. And so that was the album that really got played and burned into my brain. And I was so happy. I saw them in their final show here in Los Angeles, Rush 40. And, they played Losing It, which is, one of the nicest, deepest songs that they've got, with that beautiful violinist playing the electric violin on it. So, yeah, I've seen them probably more than anybody.
Really? How many times have you seen them?
Oh, I don't know. It's not like I'm 60 or 70. I think probably maybe 20, 25. I mean, every time they came through, I would go see them. Yeah. Right. I say that, and I say that my wife is like, that's a lot. And I'm like, oh, I have to tell my wife's story. So we get married. Since I hear it all the time, I'd like to come see him. I'm like, great. So I get us tickets at the Universal Amphitheater, which is an indoor shed at Universal Studios, no longer exists. And I knew, because she had never gone to a Rush concert, to get tickets on the balcony. I got them first row of the balcony because I knew she wasn't going to want to stand, because I knew how it was. You know how it goes. You're on the floor, everyone stands up and doesn't sit. You don't pay for a seat, you pay to stand. So the band comes on, and the place erupts and everything else. And she takes this video, and it's a bunch of boys looking like me, and all of us are going like this. And we're all drumming at the same time. And she had the best time. She was like, God, they're fantastic musicians. Watching all of you know all the words is ridiculous, wonderful fun. But probably the most telling thing about the whole concert, at the intermission, we go out to go to the bathroom. At the Universal Amphitheater, they had taken cardboard, and they had said men's rooms, and they put it all over every female restroom except one. And there was no line at the women's room. And I just laughed and laughed. I'm like, yeah, Rush really isn't a girl band, is it?
So, yeah. So funny. I mean, they are, yeah, I haven't met too many girls who are into Rush. I mean, I suppose prog rock is quite a guy genre in general. Rush would be prog rock, right? A variety of different things, as well as, Genesis. Yes, it seems like you've got, definitely an appreciation for prog rock. That's for sure.
No, that's my triumvirate, without a doubt. And also, and then King Crimson as well. I got to see King Crimson a couple of years ago, when he had Robert Fripp have the three drummers at the front of the stage. And, again, sort of jaw-dropping and mind-blowing. It was their 48th anniversary, I guess, of, in the Court of the Crimson King. These are not young men, but they've been playing their instruments for like 50 and 60 years. And, what I loved was that, we're at the Greek, and the Greek was half full, to be frank. It wasn't sold out. It's King Crimson 48 years down the line. There's a winnowing of the audience. Not that they were like a big a stadium draw ever. But guess what? They showed up and put on the show. They didn't half-ass it. Robert Fripp didn't phone it in. These drummers weren't like, sort of like, oh, there's not enough people here. And as a performer myself, I appreciate that. And I love that. They played to those who came to commune with that stuff. And I love that. I love that so much. We saw Genesis in 2007 at the Hollywood Bowl. It was their last concert as well. And to your point about like a prog rock not being a girl thing. However, in that transition of Genesis, with Phil sort of taking the lead and the reins, they became very much pop meisters, without a doubt. They were colossal because of that. And you can see that at the Hollywood Bowl. So it's the Hollywood Bowl. It's raining a little bit. They're doing some of these great oldies, this old medley. They're doing, they're doing stuff out of Trick of the Tail. It's wonderful. It's great. They're doing ripples, for God's sakes. And everyone's sort of sitting down, enjoying the light show, enjoying what's going on. But then all of a sudden, the opening chords to Follow You, Follow Me come on. Everybody's favorite prom song from 1978. And literally all the girls in the audience just start standing up and start dancing. And I was like, right. Because in the end, I'm here for the totality, but I'm hoping they might sing Supper's Ready. They're not going to sing Supper's Ready, but they're going to sing Follow You, Follow Me. and they're gonna sing dun, 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 dun. As soon as those chords came out, everybody gets up, and Phil's like a master showman saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. We're all just doing this back and forth. It's so hoary, it's so cliched, and yet it's so fulfilling. And all the girls get up and start dancing. All the guys who have dates, they get up with the girls, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm at a pop show. And I was, and it was okay. It was great. So the amalgamation of it all together comes together for that, without a doubt.
Yeah, for sure. Are you a fan of Phil Collins' solo stuff?
It's really startling and good. And Face Value is so confessional and wonderful. It's a beautiful, moody piece. You really feel, I do, whatever Phil was going through at that time. I think that album still has that locked in. You listen to any of those, you listen to that top to bottom, and not many people listen to top to bottoms anymore. But you put it on side A and listen to the whole thing. It's a real journey, especially because it ends with Tomorrow Never Knows. Phil Collins has the balls and the chutzpah to cover Tomorrow Never Knows at the end of his first solo album. And that, if you're going to cover John Lennon in one of his craziest, most wonderful, cool songs, you better do it right. And he does. He pays homage to it and also makes it his own, which is a real trick, I think, without a doubt. Plus, he introduces the song to a whole bunch of people who, unfortunately, even though it's 1980, there's a whole nother generation that grows up and goes, oh, the Beatles, John Lennon, yeah, I heard of them, right? Because that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Phil Collins' pop music, sometimes people say, it's very cheesy and stuff, but like actually some of it, he was very, very inspired by the Beatles, even some of the corny numbers, like One More Night and stuff like that. I remember reading an interview where he says that that's really just him trying to do John Lennon. I think his albums have aged unbelievably well, Phil Collins. They have such wonderful players on, like Lee Sklar on bass, and they're classic albums. Genesis as well, obviously, is, they're an incredible band. I think they're due to actually play here in the UK. They're reuniting. I think Phil's...
Well, that's what I heard. The last Domino tour. And, I did not see Phil on this last tour. Leland was playing with him, though, where he had a cast of thousands behind him and he sat in the stool.
Yeah.
I did not go, I think probably maybe out of fear. Having said before, I like to go see everybody to see if they can muster one more thing. I think I was a little fearful for him being diminished. I read his autobiography, which is bracing.
Yeah.
And I love him for that. I love him. I thought, way to go. He wasn't trying to put a package together and put a shine on anything. And I really appreciate that. He's lived his life like that. But I didn't know if I wanted to go see Phil not behind the drums. And
it's a real shame to see him not able to play anymore, because he is probably one of the best, if not the best, rock drummer. So underappreciated in a way. People don't.
Completely.
Phil Collins, they hear cheesy pop guy. They don't think of him as the incredible player.
Now you see, there was some YouTuber or something over Labor Day or over something. They played Genesis concerts from every era, like on succeeding nights. And so you got to watch their set. But what I really got to admire, to your point, was his drumming while he's singing, the things that he was doing, and the drum that really supports all of that wonderful stuff that Tony Banks and Mike do. When him and Chester Thompson do those double drums with one another, licking into stuff, it's extraordinary. And and I'm a Rush fan, so Neil Peart is my guy. But I'm watching Phil effortlessly make these things happen, and it's just again, you're right. They think he's they think he's against all odds. They make fun of him, right? And I don't think so.
Although less and less these days. I remember a time like, I don't know, 15 years ago or whenever it was, when Phil had become a bit of a laughing stock, but now he's kind of cool again. A lot of the pop stuff is like these days that he was using sounds that are kind of really prevalent in top 40 music. He was using them right at the cutting edge, early 80s. So he's an incredibly interesting artist. Patrick, what I wanted to ask you about, we've chatted about music, but for my listeners who aren't familiar with your work on what I think is one of the best TV shows, I would go as far as to say that I prefer it maybe to Breaking Bad, which previously was my favorite TV show along with The Sopranos, but Better Call Saul is, it's a masterpiece. of television, storytelling, acting. When I gathered that you guys had to delay filming. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but the United States has not handled the COVID pandemic with. Yes, indeed. It's not been handled as well as one could have hoped. So, a lot of production shut down. We didn't know what was going to be. Originally, it wouldn't be worth it to go back only to shut down. And so we figured by delaying three months or so, there'd be better information. And frankly, we had hoped there might be a vaccine start to come around, which is the case. So we're going to go back in the new year and start to work on season 6. And that'll be good because I think some of our older actors and everybody who's older on staff will probably be in line to get a vaccine. We'll still be working under the safety protocols that the unions have arranged. But the good news is though, even though there's a delay, we will do season 6. And instead of just 10 episodes, it's going to be 13 episodes to finish it all off this time. And so I think we're very excited about that.
Wow, that's going to be awesome. So is season 6 the final season?
Yeah. Peter Gould and Vince had announced that. I think probably for a couple of reasons, and this is nothing that I know for certain, but I imagine one, they don't want to overstay their welcome. We've had a really extraordinary run and welcoming from the old Breaking Bad fans. And I think they have an opportunity to sort of wrap things up with equal number of episodes of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. And, now we have the El Camino movie in the Breaking Bad universe as well. So I think they got really, after Breaking Bad, it's like they won all of this money in Vegas and they pushed all their chips back in the middle of the table and said, let it ride. And they made this thing called Better Call Saul. And I think it was really ballsy of them to right then and there do that. And I think the show has matured, found its legs, found what it is. And I think again, I just don't think they want to overstay their welcome. They want to go ahead and, wrap this story up. They've always written towards what needs to be written, not what they think ought to be done. And that's what's driven them. And I think that's what's driving them to finally get some closure. Although I don't know how closing it will be, to tell you the truth.
So do you think, is the writing process does it evolve as the seasons go on, or did they have this kind of grand vision as to how it's all going to end? Because it all feels so deliberate.
No, it does feel deliberate, but that is the majesty of these writers, and I don't say that lightly. They don't know what's going on. They knew, certain things. They know what happens to Mike. They don't know what happens to, now we've got this Gene character out in Nebraska working at the Cinnabon. That was new. And so, especially like with Ray Seahorn, who plays Kim Wexler so exquisitely, she was an X factor that they didn't know exactly how she was going to play in. Same with Michael McKean as Chuck. That was sort of an invention that they thought would, be good for a minute or two. And then it ended up, occupying seasons 2 and 3, basically. So they don't know. They get these characters together, and like good writers, they sort of go like, well, what would happen if? Well, what would happen if? And what's the ramifications of this? And does this make sense? I don't think there was ever any grand 6-season scheme. When they get in the room in the beginning of the season, they're like, okay, where'd we leave off? Right. Now what? What cause and effect, what goes on? So, I certainly don't have any input. I've been telling them for 5 seasons now that I think Howard should be married to Beyonce, but they seem to ignore that. I'm not sure why.
Well,
so
maybe they'll.
So I sort of wait and see. Go ahead.
Maybe they'll change their mind this time.
maybe.
So, and in terms of like how intense is the filming process? Is it long days and stuff like that? Super long days and stuff like that. Of course, I see the show through Howard Hamlin's eyes, right? So yeah. I'm basically I'm in a nice lawyer show. And then when I watch it, I'm like, what's all this gunplay and drug use going on? It's very violent. And consequently, also my experience on the show is like that. I'm in office buildings. I go to lunch. I'm on the phone. And so, Jonathan Banks, who plays Mike Emmertrout so exquisitely well, he came into HHM one day because it was a split day where we're doing one scene on one set and another scene on another set.
His set was going to be out in the desert. So he comes into getting hair and makeup, and he comes marching into HHM, and he goes, "What the fuck? You're all in here in air conditioning with water, and I got to go work out in the goddamn desert?"
That is the most bang on impersonation of someone that I've heard in a while, I must say.
If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, we would really appreciate it if you were able to leave us a rating and a review. We really welcome suggestions for future guests, so when you're leaving your review, please feel free to leave the name of anyone you would love to see featured on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast.
Well, he's a great guy. And, back to your thing, the crew works really, really hard. That's 16 and 20-hour days, man. You see the finished product. They're very particular about what their shots are and how they line it up and how they light it. And Marshall Adams is our director of photography, and he really makes sure that everything is great. Steve Latecki is our lighter. We've got great directors. Vince directs, Peter directs, Tom Schnauz has directed, Melissa Bernstein directed last year. And these are all people who have been intimately involved with the universe from Breaking Bad on. So there's a real care and quality about what goes on. And I think, even though it takes a while for us to make them and people are bummed out about that, I think when they come, they're happy that they're there and the way that they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a fantastic show. Thanks so much for working on it and being a part of it. And I really can't wait to watch it. And it's a shame because I guess it would have come out roundabout in the new year had the original schedule. But it's more to look forward to when this as this pandemic begins to ease off. So yeah. Really...
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic was good in one respect. We all watched a lot more television. And if you're in television, you got to catch up on some stuff. Even Barack Obama, former president of the United States here, he put out his end of year lists, and he put Saul as his number one show. When he was writing his memoirs, he would take a break and watch Saul, which, I'm in a business where obviously, my face is out there, and, I understand all that. But I still, the idea that I could be in a room with like 100 people and Barack Obama would be there and he would look across the room and think, that's Howard Hamlin. That made me pretty excited. I was like, oh shit, that's kind of cool.
Oh, I think that would be the case for a lot of people. Better Call Saul, among all the Breaking Bad fanatics that I know, and there are a lot, because that is, one of the most seminal pieces of pop culture. People feel the same way about Better Call Saul, which is impossible. It almost achieve in art. Like that.
I agree. I think when it first came out, there was a whole notion of, oh, you better not spoil what I just watched, right? I think there's a lot of like, what's this going to be? And of course, Breaking Bad ended on a high operatic note. Right? It was 6 seasons of watching that whole thing. So there's no way Saul could, pick up on that energy and keep going. It had to be its own thing. So it sort of went whoop, back here and then slowly burned. But I think the reward for those who stuck with it was an appreciation of like, we're in the same closet. We're a different piece of clothing, but we're equally comfortable to wear. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real masterpiece. Patrick, thank you so much for coming on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. Been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I hope you continue to enjoy music as we're locked down and stuff. And yeah, really looking forward to the new season of Better Call Saul. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and keep staying passionate about music.
Absolutely. Hey, Tom, thanks for having me, and rock on, baby.
Hi, I'm Tom Cridland, and I'm the host of the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. Alongside having conversations with our amazing guests on the show, I'm a fashion designer. Me and my team create clothing that is so well made we back it with a guarantee of free repair to encourage sustainability in the fashion industry and to underline my commitment to making beautiful wardrobe staples that stand the test of time. Some well-known designs of mine include the 30-year sweatshirt and the 30-year t-shirt, which are backed with 30-year guarantees. Next year, you can look out for the half-century jeans and the 100-year hoodie, which come with 50 and 100-year guarantees respectively. To find out more about Tom Cridland clothing, just head to tomcridland.com.